Hello and welcome to the latest episode of LAMSIG Live. And today we've got a very special guest and dear friend of mine, somebody who I've learnt a lot from about leadership, about inclusivity, and someone whose wisdom I'm sure you will appreciate as well. So I'm very happy to introduce Giovanni Licata, who is also one of our Sister SIG coordinators as well. Giovanni, can you just tell us a little bit about you? What takes up most of your time? Tell us a bit about you.
Okay, so hello everyone. First of all, thank you, Lucy, for inviting me, for having me. Okay, so what takes most of my time at the moment? So I'm currently working at the University of Florence, and although I'm based in Rome, but I kind of commute between Rome and Florence, and where I'm a lecturer and I work for the language department, and um, and I'm also, of course, doing a lot of teacher training in my life because I'm a, Delta and Delta trainer. Though Delta takes most of my time, I would say, in the teacher training world. And I'm also joint coordinator of the If and Sensig, like you said. So, of course, that also takes a lot of my time, as you know. So, yeah, I have a pretty busy schedule.
Okay, thank you. And prior to sort of where you're working at the moment, you were in a leadership role as one of the directors of IH Roma Manzoni. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? What were you doing in that leadership role?
Yeah. So, okay. So IH Realm has a bit of an unconventional setup in the sense it is owned by 12 12, 15, shareholders and partners. So, and there's no a single school director, but the school is run by a board of directors, which is, elected by the owners. So the shareholders or the owners will vote for five members of the board, and the board runs the school. So they kind of take on the role of the school directors, and at the same time, I would say the academic manager, so the director of studies or the teacher trainer coordinator, they will also I think, take on some of the duties that normally a school director would have in a language school. So
Okay.
I was involved in that for many, many years. I would say about, I would say maybe, 10 years of teaching. I had, as head of teacher training, and I would say, about 8 years of as a member of the board.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Great.
part
So,
of directing the school, yes, or in being involved in my role as a yeah, I guess leader in the team.
and looking back now, I mean, after all that leadership experience,
Mm,
what advice would you give to your pre-manager self?
that is a brilliant question. Um, I think I think the advice that I never got that I would have appreciated. I mean, I got lots and lots of, I'd say, precious advice because of the school setup where, owners moved from leadership roles to non-leadership roles. So it was easy to get advice. But the one piece of advice that I think, would be really, really useful to have um, is that it never stops once you're in a leadership position. Then you need to you're constantly involved and constantly thinking and worried and concerned with the well-being of the school. So
Yeah.
it's one thing that you think. I think one needs to be aware that it's not something that stops during the 24 hours or 7 days of the week.
Yeah, and I suppose especially when you are a sort of senior manager as well and a shareholder director, it's sort of even more evident. And what made you kind of go into leadership?
I think initially, like you said, it well, like I was saying before, it just happened by chance because somebody left the position and because of the school setup, we were always encouraged to take on new roles. So I think initially it was pretty spontaneous, and I'd also gotten involved into the day-to-day running of the school and just again kind of organically it happened organically, so it wasn't something that I'd planned, I would say. But then I really got into it, especially for the first you know 6 months. It was really hard. I mean, 6 months to a year was really hard work, and it wasn't easy to transition from a non-leadership position to a leadership position. I mean, you can see things from a very different perspective, I think. So it
Mm.
helps me now, actually. It's been really helpful. It is really helpful because I mean it helps you to look at things from, like I said, a manager's perspective, from an academic manager's perspective. So you can see what other people are thinking of when they're making certain decisions.
Mm. Yeah, I mean that transition is it's really it's tough, isn't it? And we've mentioned sort of quite a lot in conversations we've had at the PCE and at other events is like it is you don't really get that much training, do you, to moving
Mhm.
from teaching into managing. What kind of advice would you give to teachers who are moving into management positions now about how to handle that transition?
Um, I think again, the best piece of advice would be to spend a few weeks when they start, maybe even a month, um, hanging out in the school next to the people that are working in the school and kind of like observe what they do. I
Mm,
think um, that is actually, a tip that I got from somebody who'd been working for the school for a very long time,
mm,
when I moved into my academic management position and then into my role as a member of the board. And it was possibly the most helpful piece of advice I got. I think I spent a long time just observing what, the secretaries, the receptionists, the back office admin people, um, or, the exams department, just the different people in the school, what they were doing. Spent
mm,
some time just observing what they were doing. I think that's really important because I think in any context, I think the most important mistake to avoid is making assumptions, obviously.
mm. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, talking about mistakes or perhaps problems, because obviously as a leader, you face a lot of problems on a daily basis. Can you tell us about a problem that you had as a leader and how you dealt with it?
Mm. Wow, I can think of a lot of examples. Um, so a problem that I had as a leader, um, I think, well, I can say, so I can think of a couple of things. I think it's very important. So I remember there was a situation where one um, employees, as somebody, working for the school as a teacher, was really struggling with some of the tasks and that they had to perform, and of course there were consequences because of course other stakeholders were involved, and there were silly tasks, something like, I don't know, filling out the register or signing off some documents, so simple things. Um, but of course, it meant that other people were having to do the work, and that's the thing that you can see when you're a leader. And obviously, you have an overview of everything that's happening. So I remember that the way I dealt with that initially was trusting that the person would do it, when told, and or when reminded or something like that. So I just said, it just needs a reminder. But then I realized that that doesn't necessarily work for everyone, just because we're very different. There's, things that I forget to do or things that I don't like doing. So I kind of, have a what's it called, selective memory. So, so, um, so I ended up having to establish a kind of checklist for this person where that would connect, their tasks to my tasks, and that worked well because then they it served as a reminder to them and to me. So I managed to partially merge our timetable so that we could do these tasks together, and they could see how important they were for other people in the school. I think that's what counted the most. um, so that's one thing that I can think of. I can also think of situations where I realized that I had not dealt with an issue very, very well. And I think, like, for example, simple things like, I don't know, booking rooms, um, or finding, uh, you know, making sure that all the conditions for certain works to be running are there before the course starts, things like that. And I think one of the most important things, I mean, as a leader, is to be able to admit that you were wrong. I think that is something we don't hear a lot, in talks, do we?
Yeah, that's true because it's like expected to be right, like this the kind of expectation that yeah, the leader should
Yeah,
always be
I
right, but
think
in fact,
just saying, "Oh, sorry, I really, really messed that up." I mean,
yeah,
uh, yeah, I think that is totally fine. Everyone does, and I think it's better to admit it than, trying to defend something that just really didn't work out or didn't work out the way it should have.
yeah, and of course, I suppose it creates a more psychologically safe environment as well, doesn't it, for everybody? If they see that
Yeah.
the manager can admit them when they were wrong, they can do
Yeah.
the same as well.
And it was so interesting to me how initially, sometimes when, especially particularly in the team of trainers, I mean, because the team of trainers was because I was, a teacher trainer, and I am a teacher trainer. So that they are, they were directly involved in, courses that I was helping to set up. So I noticed initially whenever I said, even like on a WhatsApp group or
Mhm.
something that we shared to communicate. And whenever I said something like, "Oh, no, 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 sorry, that scrap that, forget about what I just said. That's not what we're doing." The initial reaction was, "Oh, wow, no, no, don't worry, nothing. It's not a big deal." And I just said to them, "No, no, I know it's not a big deal, but it's still like I was wrong. No, we're not doing that." I think that's really important. I think
Mm,
that's
yeah.
like you said, it's communication based on trust is important from both sides, and trust, and entails admitting your flaws. Nobody's perfect. That's
Mm.
there you go. That's
That's so true. And something that I really want to ask you, because I know that I've learned a lot from your talks and articles about making what leaders can do to make the school more inclusive. So I suppose there are two parts to this question. Is first of all, how can we understand if our school is as inclusive as it should be? And then what can we do to make it more inclusive as leaders?
okay. Um, okay. So what can we do to understand? So these are, two very important questions. Um, um, let's start from the second one because I feel like the first one is really really complex, and it depends on the context that you're operating in, because we'd be um, dishonest, in denying that, does make a difference. So the context does count. So let's deal with the second one first. Well, the first and easiest answer is to get in touch with Ibn Sensig, and we will help you improve inclusivity in your school if that is your wish. So that's the first answer. But there's so much you can do. It's very tiny, small steps that you can do. The first one, again, is, perhaps observing who you have in the school, because inclusivity to me, I mean, inclusion, I always say to me is like a continuum. It's a space where everyone belongs, and not a space where we are. In fact, I don't really like the word inclusion, because the word inclusion sounds like we're drawing someone into our space, whereas to me, inclusion is about a shared space, like a space where you don't really know which side of the surface you're on, kind of like a Mobius strip, like one of those strips that have no sides. And and because of that, I mean, if you start observing your reality, your context, your teachers, your receptionists, the people you have in the school, it's going to be very easy to be inclusive, because you surely have a lot of identities in your everyday reality in the school, and they will help you, become more and more aware and more inclusive. Your students will, I mean, your trainees, the people that you examine. So have a look at what's around you, and make sure that start from the identities that are there, and make sure that they are part of the system. They really should be part of the system in every possible way, whether that be, the food you have in your lounge area, or the pictures that you show up on the walls. I mean, we've talked about this several times, but if your pictures are cookie cutter, photos taken from, from web repositories, they're probably not going to be as representative of your staff as they could be. And small, really small steps that can make a huge difference. And when it comes to training and mentoring the staff, yes, get in touch with organizations out there that can help you organize that. There is so much in education that we can do to make our classrooms more and our classes more inclusive. And we can do that through IPNSAN. We can do that through, equals. I mean, there's a lot of organizations out there that will, have supporting groups that can help.
Mhm.
LAMSIG, I mean, I'm sure, the SIGs, and ITEFL in general, I think they all have somebody on the SIG that will deal with that, or will call on somebody from IPNSAN. There's a good network in ITEFL in that respect, isn't there? So that really works well. With regards to the first question, Lucy, it's a very tough question, because I think realizing how inclusive you are in your context implies, taking a wider look at the context you're operating in, and that will be, the country, the social cultural context, the political situation in your country. There's so much to be considered there that perhaps it really implies some deep dive reflection, in my opinion. So it's a really tough question. I would say that the easiest answer to that would be to find a good interlocutor who operates in a different context, maybe to
Mm.
start. So, for example, we are based, I mean, you and I mean, we're both based in Italy. So maybe perhaps it's a good idea to find an interlocutor, somebody working at a conference, for example, somebody working in a different context. So not the same country, not the same social cultural context, and compare and compare
Mm,
how just talk about the issues they might have or the thoughts they might have on their inclusion
mm,
or their status of inclusion in their
mm,
context and see how they feel about the issues that they can outline and how you feel about those same issues and see if they match or not.
mm.
Does that make
And I
sense?
suppose it does, yes, totally. And I suppose like the final question, because it does take time, obviously, to create a fully inclusive school where there is this sort of shared space where everybody feels they belong. What are the kind of benefits? Like, obviously, that's an investment for school directors in terms of time and training and so on. What are the kind of benefits that can be reaped from having a more inclusive school?
Um, well, um, well, I think first of all, the fact that well-being will promote a healthy environment, and a healthy environment will mean that thriving environment, even from a financial point of view, which is what directors and owners are often worried about, and for good reasons. I mean, there is no point in denying that because, of course, they want to make sure that their schools remain healthy because that also means saving a lot of jobs and
Mm,
making sure that people have a job, the next month and the next year. So, um, but like Sarah Mercer reminds us, a healthy environment for the teachers and a healthier environment for your staff means that they are going to be more committed, and it
mm,
means that and the students are going to feel more welcomed, and it means that in the long run, your business is going to be thriving. It also means sometimes giving up some people over others. I think uh, many, many, many years ago, when I first started teaching, um, there was a class. I was teaching a class of, let's say, what we would call in Italy juniors, so
mm,
11 to 11, 12, 13-year olds, right? So middle school kids, and some of the parents in some of the parents in the group had complained about me being the teacher of the class, complained to the school director at the time. I wasn't involved in
mm,
leadership at the time. They complained about me not because of my teaching, but because of my, I guess I would say my identity. So the way I was in the room with their kids, they were worried about um, me being, with their kids or some kind of having some kind of bad influence, I guess. I don't know, my style, my personality, my identity. And it was really interesting because the school director dealt with it really, really well at the time.
mm,
And, he had to give up some of those students, which in turn paid off because, of course, the rest of the class really appreciated that.
mm,
So, and brought other, clients, I guess, to this other new customers to the school. So
mm,
that's, a great example. I think we live in times that are very skeptical of inclusivity. I mean, on the one hand, inclusion is under the radar, and it just seems like this buzzword that educators um, are, um, serving on a silver platter at any kind of conference or event. But on the other hand, we also live in times where uh, other stakeholders of our society and especially politicians and um, in fact speak against inclusivity quite often and in different parts of the world. So it is under attack and in some contexts. So it is important to remind ourselves how powerful a tool it actually is.
mm.
And if
Yeah.
we open any history book, I mean, you could see very easily that in the times of inclusion, the times of well-being and health and um, harmony have always been times of um, success for countries, for the different nations, and the people of the world. So I'll challenge anyone who's skeptical of this to find an example in the history of humanity where, a an inclusive and healthy society was unsuccessful.
Right. Well, that's a great note to finish on. So thank you so much, Giovanni. It's been really, really useful speaking to you. Obviously, such an important topic as well of inclusion. So thank you so much for your time and for helping all of our LAMSIG members and other ELT managers as well with your very useful advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Lucy. Bye bye,
Bye
Lance.
bye.